We will get started on the presentation.
Yes, thank you so much, Betty. All right, so welcome to our Turning 5 Transition to Kindergarten webinar. I'm going to give you guys a brief overview of what we'll be talking about. Again, my name is Alana Miles, and I'm a staff attorney in the Early Childhood Education Project. Betty Bios-Mayo, she's the Early Childhood Education Director, who will also be presenting. So I'll give you a brief overview of what we'll be discussing today. First, we'll be going over the Kindergarten IEP process, which is also known as the Turning 5 process. This refers to the process of your child moving from preschool to kindergarten for children with developmental delays and disabilities. And we'll go into more depth later on about what the kindergarten IEP process entails. And then we'll also go over the kindergarten placement process. We'll then start with a brief introduction of what Advocates for Children is, go over the due processes that we discussed, and we'll also allow time for questions throughout this presentation. We'll stop for a Q&A, but also keep in mind that the Q&A chat will be open and monitored by one of us, and we'll be answering questions as well as stopping for polling information, okay? So we understand this is going to be a lot of information today. Take notes, but also know that we will be providing a lot of resources. We have guides and other resources for you all at the end, and we'll be sharing how you can access those throughout our presentation, okay? Okay, so what is Advocates for Children? Advocates for Children is an independent agency that protects the rights of all New York City students. AFC was founded in 1971 by parents of students with disabilities, and the mission has expanded over the years. Currently, our mission is to ensure a high quality education for New York students who face barriers to academic success, focusing on students from low income backgrounds. And we achieve our mission in a number of ways. Our services include a helpline that's open Mondays through Thursdays from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. We offer free legal services to low income communities. We offer a host of guides and resources. We offer workshops and trainings and webinars like the one that we're giving today. And then we also do policy advocacy and impact litigation. Okay. So let's get started. So your transition to kindergarten. All children born in 2016 have a right to a public school kindergarten seat in September 2021. For families of students with disabilities, you're going to be participating in two processes. The first process is going to be the kindergarten IEP process, or what's known as the Turning 5 process. So you're going to participate in a kindergarten IEP meeting this year. You may also participate in a preschool IEP meeting, but additionally, you're going to have a kindergarten IEP meeting. And this meeting will determine your child's special education services that they will receive in September 2021. And we're going to begin the workshop by talking more about that process. You're also encouraged to participate in the kindergarten admissions process, which is applying to DOE schools. All families, including families of students with disabilities, are encouraged to apply in this process. The application to apply to DOE schools will be available at some point in the winter. And because public schools serve students with or without disabilities, most students will attend the school that makes them an offer through the kindergarten admissions process. So you'll learn a little bit later on about applying through the kindergarten admissions process as well, and how and why you should do so. Okay. All right. So before we go further, let's talk a little bit about the law. So children with disabilities have educational rights. And their rights are governed by the Individuals with Disabilities and Education Act, which is a national law protecting students with disabilities. All right. So all children, this law protects all children through age 21 with a disability. All right. And under the IDEA, you have a right to a free and appropriate public education. We're going to launch a poll about what you think appropriate means. And then we'll talk a bit more. And then Betty, you can keep the poll up for a bit while I go specifically through each one and then go back to. Okay, so you have a right to a free and appropriate public education, also known as a FAPE. So free. Free is no cost to your family. Appropriate, let's see what everyone thinks appropriate means. An education that allows a child to make real progress, 53% say. An education that allows a child to do the best they can, okay. The third one, an education that allows a child to make any progress, about 5 people respond, and it depends on what the school has available. Okay, so this appropriate piece is the area where there can be the most disagreement. So appropriate allows the student to make meaningful progress in school based on the child's individual needs and abilities, but it's not the best possible education. So while we say it's not the best possible education, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't seek out what's appropriate, but we just want you to understand more about the law so that you're well informed when you go to your IEP meetings, okay? So after appropriate, your education will be public, and it's an education, okay? We can end this. Okay, so all students have a right to a free and appropriate public education, also known as FAPE, in what's called the least restrictive environment. Okay, so the ideal behind the least restrictive environment is that to the best extent possible, we want students with IEPs to be taught with students without IEPs. And in a moment, we're going to talk about what an IEP is. Okay. So this will be student dependent, and we'll talk about a bit more about what different environments are, but it'll be tailored to that student's particular needs. Okay. So I just mentioned the word IEP. What is an IEP? An IEP is an individualized education program. It's individualized, which means that it should be tailored for your student. It shouldn't be a recommendation from another student. It should be tailored and specific to your student. An IEP is legally binding, so it's like a contract. Everything that is on the IEP, it must be given to the student. Okay, and the IEP will be based on what the student needs, not based on what the school has. So if your IEP makes a recommendation, that recommendation should be implemented regardless of what the school can provide. The IEP is created at an IEP meeting that you'll participate in, and we'll talk a bit more about the IEP meeting and who participates and how that happens. And your IEP will be good for 1 year, and it must be reviewed annually. However, you can always request additional IEP meetings throughout the school year if it's appropriate to make changes. Okay. we're gonna ask questions in a minute, but let's go to preparing for your kindergarten IEP meeting. So there's multiple roles in the kindergarten IEP meeting. The DOE has a specific role, your preschool will have a specific role, and you, when I say you, the parent, will also have a role. Okay, so let's talk about the DOE's role first. So the DOE sent or should have sent you a mailing with information and a list of kindergarten orientation meetings in the fall. They're going to be starting soon. I think the first one, the first one is next week, right? Or no, I think the first one may have already started. So there will be a list of kindergarten orientation meetings in the fall. If you didn't get this mailing, work with your preschool to make sure that the DOE has your correct information on file, because you'll continue to get mailings and you'll continue to get stuff in the mail, and you want to make sure that you're getting all the information. All right. So make sure that they have your correct address so you don't miss future mailings. In December and January, right? The DOE is going to host online this year kindergarten orientation meetings for families of students with disabilities, and we can share those dates later. The DOE is also going to send you at some point, starting maybe later in January, later in December or January, a blue letter in the mail. This blue letter is going to be called a notice of referral. Okay. Um, each family, if you don't receive this letter, again, please talk to your preschool to make sure that they have your correct information on file, because if you don't receive this letter, it may be the case that you won't receive future mailings future mailings in the mail. So each child's transition team, you're going to be assigned to what's called a DOE representative. Your DOE representative is going to be really, really crucial throughout this process. I refer to this person as your go-to person throughout the kindergarten IEP process. The DOE representative is likely going to be a school psychologist or a social worker, and they may be working out of your child's own school or in a CSE office. Your DOE representative will give you information about your IEP meeting. If additional evaluations, or any evaluations are needed, you will want to speak to your DOE representative about that. If you want to make requests for additional evaluations, you would do so through your DOE representative. And generally, if you have questions throughout this process, your DOE representative should be someone that you should rely on, okay? The DOE representative is going to review your child's preschool IEP and progress reports and decide whether or not to do classroom observations and other assessments. So next we're going to talk, and then they're going to schedule IEP meetings between February and May. So next we're going to go in and talk about the preschool's role in this IEP meeting, because they're also really important. So your preschool is going to submit progress reports or anything that's necessary for your child's IEP meeting. Okay, they're also going to participate in the Turning 5 IEP meeting. Your child's teacher may participate in this IEP meeting, or anyone else who's knowledgeable to speak about or make a recommendation about what your child needs, or what for kindergarten. Okay. This year may be a bit different. We talked about classroom observations, but it may be the case that the observation is done via Zoom or another platform if schools remain closed, okay? And then the last role is your role, you, the parent. So throughout this process, we encourage you to learn everything that you can about this process, take notes, be involved, ask questions, and if you need anyone to resort to, know that you have options. You can go to your DOE representative, go to your preschool. You want to make sure you participate in the IEP meeting, and then visit. When I say visit, that may be done virtually this year. Visit and get information about the possible schools that your child may attend or that you may be interested in. Okay. So at this point, we're going to pause for some questions. I know I said a mouthful, so let me know if you have any questions and we'll be happy to answer them.
There currently aren't any questions in the Q&A, so please, if you do have a question, remember to use that as an option. I do see a question in the chat that was just posted, I believe in regards to with the preschool submitting progress reports and other updates, what happens if your child spent the whole year doing remote learning and hasn't made much progress?
Okay. So, oh, you want to?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so yeah, so progress reports will show that if the progress report has shown that your child hasn't made much progress, that's something to discuss at the IEP meeting to talk about what resources are necessary so that the child receives an appropriate education for kindergarten. So all of that should be discussed at the IEP meeting, and if there's a recommendation for additional supports because the child hasn't progressed or that they need something additional, that's also that's an appropriate recommendation that you may want to consider at an IEP meeting if you're a parent or an educator participating in the meeting.
That's all correct. The only thing I would add is, if your child has related service providers, if your child has a SEIT, your child's special education teacher, all these people should be submitting reports to the DOE. Your child's preschool knows your child, besides you, better than anyone else will at that IEP meeting. Definitely more than your DOE rep, most likely, right? Because they are spending this year working directly with your child. So even if sessions are remote, even if there is limited progress, that should all be documented in the report. And hopefully these providers will also participate at the IEP meeting and share their insights as well. And now we did get a bunch of questions in the Q&A. I'll just let you know that many of these we will be answering throughout the presentation. There are questions about applying to schools. We will get to that in the later half of this workshop. In terms of what evaluations may be done this year, the DOE, when they send you the blue notice of referral, that'll indicate which evaluations they intend to do, if any, if your child needs them. You also have a right to request any evaluations that are not, that the DOE isn't planning on conducting. And that isn't to say that the DOE will conduct all those evaluations or will conduct them in person. There may be remote evaluations this year. And like last year, I think there will be a lot of reliance on your child's current providers and teachers and those progress reports that they submit. But you still have a right to request evaluations. Evaluations may be scheduled remotely by laptop, by phone, by video. If that evaluation, if you don't feel it's accurate, you can talk to your DOE representative to request a new evaluation. And in some cases can, based on that, if you disagree with the evaluation results, receive private evaluations. We'll kind of get through some of these questions, some of these other questions that are currently in the Q&A throughout the presentation. So for right now, we'll move on. And if your question still isn't answered, we will come back to it, definitely. All right. So who should attend the IEP meeting? Many of you already told us that you are the parents of preschool students with disabilities who are already receiving special education services. So you should be familiar with the IEP meeting and the IEP process. And as this chart shows, you are a key member of the IEP team. You are the person who knows your child the best. Speaking to parents, you are the person who knows your child better than anyone else at the IEP meeting. You have a right to 5 days notice because we want you to be present at that IEP meeting. What that means is you shouldn't have the DOE calling you and saying, hi, are you ready to have an IEP meeting right now? You should have notice ahead of time. You should receive copies of evaluations. You should receive copies of progress reports beforehand so that you come to the meeting prepared and that you can really, be an active member. If this should be a discussion at the IEP meeting, nothing should be predetermined. apart from you, the next people who know your child really well are your child's teachers, right? So if your child is receiving SEEIT services or has a special education teacher, your child's special education teacher should be present at the IEP meeting. Okay, it should not be any special education teacher that's available. We really want the DOE to make every effort to have your child's teacher participate. They should be notifying your child's teacher just in case. You should also notify your child's preschool. Let them know when the IEP meeting is scheduled so that they can also participate. If your child may be considered for a general education classroom, then there should be an general education teacher there as well. If your child is currently in a gen ed classroom, your child's participating in a pre-K program, then your child's teacher should be at the IEP meeting. A school psychologist should be present. This is a person who can explain the evaluations and make recommendations for changing settings for next year. There's also a district representative. This is a person who knows the services available in your district. Sometimes some people can play multiple roles. So the district representative can also be the school psychologist, can also be one of the teachers present at the meeting. And even though there's this person who's familiar with the services that the district has available at the IEP meeting, I just want to remind you, your child's services should not be based on what's available, but what your child needs and what is appropriate for your child. Then there is room for other persons. This could be a huge variety of people, definitely an interpreter if your preferred language is a language other than English, and you should notify the DOE of that beforehand. If your child has medical needs and you're submitting medical documentation or you're submitting private evaluations, you may want your child's doctor to be able to participate or the person who conducted the evaluations. You should notify the DOE of that beforehand and let your provider know, let your doctor, evaluator know so that they can participate as well. This other person can also be a parent member who's a parent who's gone through this process before and can be there to help you advocate. You would have to request that a parent member be present beforehand. So that is, again, something that you would raise with your DOE representative. Apart from that, really, you have a lot of say and flexibility. Anyone that you want to attend who has knowledge about your child, you're welcome to invite them to the IEP meeting. It is best practice to give the DOE notice that this person will be participating. This phone icon is just as a quick COVID update. We want to let you know that IEP meetings are taking place virtually this year. For the most part, they are taking place by phone. Again, that doesn't mean that someone should call you up out of the blue to have an IEP meeting. You are still entitled to notice. And although they're taking place by phone, everyone who's required to participate should still participate. And best practice is that they do a roll call so that you know who's on the line. And if they haven't done that, if people haven't introduced themselves, you can ask them to introduce themselves to you and let them know and let you know what their role is at the meeting. Classifications. So for preschool, all students are classified as a preschool student with a disability. And whether they receive preschool special education services, their eligibility is dependent on either a diagnosed condition or if they have a delay in one of the 5 areas of development. For kindergarten, your child will be eligible for special education services if they meet one of these 13 classifications of a disability. So these are, again, to determine whether your child is eligible, not necessarily the services that your child will receive. Each child will only receive one of the 13 classifications, but again, the classification does not determine your child's services. So for example, a child who's classified as having emotional disturbance can receive speech therapy. They do not need to be classified as having a speech or language impairment. This is one key difference I know from preschool, and we really highlight it so that you're aware that it'll happen beforehand. Because again, it is at least a part of the IEP meeting where you're really focused on your child's needs and less so on your child's strengths necessarily. So just keep it in mind. Something that I flag for parents often is that for children diagnosed with ADHD, for example, a common classification is other health impairment. And for children who have autism, even though the classification doesn't drive services for the most part, children with a classification of autism, uh, their parents do have a right to parent training and counseling provided by the school. So that is something that will also be added and incorporated into the IEP. And again, if you have any questions, keep putting them in the Q&A and we will address them at kind of the next break. So important sections of the IEP, you are all experts because you have preschoolers with IEPs. The first section is present levels of performance. This is a discussion of your child's strengths and needs. A lot of it is based on the evaluations and progress reports that are submitted to the DOE this year. There are, based on your child's strengths and needs and present levels of performance, you'll develop program recommendations, related services, supports and recommendations, and you'll develop annual goals. The annual goals, the key thing to remember is that you want them to be specific and measurable, right? And specific to your child as well. So what that means is we don't want a goal that says in 1 year, Jason will be a better reader, because that does not tell us anything about Jason's current ability or how we're going to determine if he's made any progress, right, throughout kindergarten. A better goal would be, in 1 year, Jason will be able to read all letters of the alphabet. We'll recognize capital letters, lowercase letters, right? Or in 1 year, Jason will be able to read 15 three-letter sight words. It's all dependent on Jason's current abilities and what we expect he'll be able to accomplish in the next year with the appropriate program and supports and recommendations. The program we will go over basically refers to the classroom setting, and we're going to go through what the different program options there are. We'll also talk in more detail about the related services and supports. Parent concerns, as I've said, you're a key member of the IEP meeting. There are sections throughout the IEP where the DOE should document if you disagree with anything that they are recommending, but also with what you want them to know about your child and what you want them to take into account, right? So if your concern more than anything is about your child's behavior, that should be documented in the IEP. They should indicate what your concerns are, what behavior specifically, and think about what services they can offer and provide to address those behavioral needs. Okay. All right, and this is where we start getting into, I mentioned the program and service recommendations. This is what we call the continuum of services. So we're starting with least restrictive and getting more restrictive. All the programs on this slide are available in theory in every DOE non-specialized school. That means that all your neighborhood schools should have each of these different program and classroom settings. The first is general education with supports and services. A general education classroom is a classroom of about 25 or more students, one teacher who's a general education teacher. And that's it, right? The additional supports and services would be for an individual child, whatever their IEP recommends. That can look like their related services, so speech, OT, physical therapy in the form of push in or pull out, or more significant supports, including time, individual or group sessions with a special education teacher. And we'll talk about what that's called a little bit later, but it's the equivalent of a CIT for school-age children. A bit more restrictive is an integrated co-teaching class, also called an ICT. This is a class for children with and without disabilities. So children with and without IEPs are in the same classroom. There are two teachers. One is a special education teacher and one is a general education teacher. And this could be for a full day or for a part of the day. In theory, for a child in an ICT, the goal is that you should not, if you're just looking into the room, you shouldn't be able to tell who are the students who have IEPs and who do not, right? All children should receive support children with the IEPs get that additional support from the special education teacher. Then there's a special class in a non-specialized school. So these are also called self-contained. This is a small class of just 12 students, one teacher, and sometimes also a paraprofessional, so 12 to 1-to-1 or 12 to 1. All the students in this class are students with IEPs. As I mentioned, the teacher is a special education teacher, and it's for students who need, additional academic and behavioral support in order to make progress. But again, this is in a non-specialized school. So this is a special class in one of the neighborhood schools in your community. Sorry,
sorry.
If your child's IEP recommends any of these programs that we've listed here, then more likely than not, your child will be attending school at the school that made you a kindergarten offer through the kindergarten admissions process. And we're going to go through the kindergarten admissions process later in this presentation, but just wanted to let you know when you're applying to those schools, all these programs should be available in every one of those schools that's listed in the application. So now we are getting into more restrictive settings. The first is a special class in a specialized school or a District 75 school. For the most part, we refer to DOE schools as District 1 through 32. That's based on the geographic location and school district of where it is. District 75 isn't a physical place. It refers to all the special education programs that the DOE has throughout the city. You cannot apply to a District 75 school. So it is not one of the schools that you would apply through the kindergarten admissions process. That said, if your child's IEP recommends a placement in a District 75 school, the DOE is responsible for identifying that school, sending you a letter letting you know what that school is, and you should have the opportunity to, if not visit, at least contact the school, speak to someone from the school and make sure that it'd be able to meet your child's needs. There are a variety of different types of classes in District 75 programs. One is a 12 to 1-to-1. Again, that means 12 students, one teacher, one paraprofessional. 8 to 1-to-1, 8 students, one teacher, one paraprofessional. 6 to 1-to-1, 6 students, one teacher, paraprofessional. And 12 to 1-to-4, 12 students, one teacher, 4 paraprofessionals. Each of these different types of class ratios is meant to serve students with fairly unique needs. Generally we'll highlight for you the 12 to 1-to-4 classroom we see for students who have, severe and multiple disabilities, usually both physical, cognitive, a combination that affects their independent functioning. With 6 to 1-to-1, we do see that as a common recommendation that the DOE makes for students who have autism and have pretty significant delays and need really intensive supports, which can include a lot of behavioral supports, emotional support, also have cognitive needs, significant language delays. That is a common recommendation that the DOE will make. We have more resources that we'll provide at the end of the workshop where you can get more information about each one of these different classroom recommendations. So what's considered a little bit more restrictive than District 75 are state-approved non-public schools, also called NPSs. Non-public, basically private schools that serve students with disabilities. All the students who attend these schools are students with IEPs. In that way, it's similar to District 75. One way that these schools are different, or one primary way that they're different, is that many of these schools focus on serving children with specific classifications. And in doing that, may develop some expertise in being able to work with that population, right? So some NPSs, for example, only accept students who have a classification of autism and speech and language impairment. Others will only serve students with, emotional disturbance. And as an example, they may also have a school psychiatrist who's on staff to help with the behavioral needs of the students who attend that school. more restrictive. In order to get admissions to an NPS, you can apply to an NPS, and many of them will review your records and let you know if they're making your child an offer. But unless your child's IEP recommends a non-public school, those offers are for the most part conditional. So basically their schools are saying, if the DOE recommends that your child attend an NPS, we would be happy to serve your child. Without that recommendation, there's no guarantee that Department of Education would pay them. And so they would not, for the most part, many of them will not admit your child and guarantee a placement. More restrictive than an NPS is residential placement. This is not common for kindergarten children, but students who are attending kindergarten, but it is for students who require care on a 24-hour basis. Yes. Then there is home instruction, and it is available for children who have such significant physical, emotional, medical needs that make attending school would be impossible for them or very difficult for them. And so again, we'll allow some time in a moment for Q&A, but before we move on, I am going to do a quick poll. Oops. 1 second. And this is particularly relevant for everyone here whose child attends a preschool special class right now. So I'll give you a moment to respond. All right, many of you have answered, and most of you got this question correct. So the statement was true or false. If a child's preschool IEP recommends a special class, then the child's kindergarten IEP must recommend a District 75 placement. That is false. It's false for a few reasons. One, there should not be any automatics, right? Whatever the child's current program and service recommendations are, does not determine what the child will need going forward. You will have an IEP, or you should have an IEP meeting each year to make a new assessment, a new determination about what your child needs at the current period, or for next year. Second, although we hear often that the DOE will only recommend District 75 for children who've attended preschool special classes, if your child was doing really well in a preschool special class, for example, in a 12 to 1-to-1 preschool special class, they may do very well in a 12 to 1-to-1 special class in a non-specialized school. They may also do very well in one of the specialized programs that we'll talk about in a moment. Or your child may need, if your child needs really intensive supports and have very specific needs, and the DOE doesn't have a program that can meet your child's needs, then maybe your child should attend an NPS. And the DOE can recommend an NPS placement for kindergarten on your child's IEP without first making a District 75 recommendation. And that is something that we hear very often from parents, is that they're told, we can't recommend an NPS or something more restrictive until you try this other option. If the evaluations and the progress reports show that your child needs that service and that service is appropriate for your child, the DOE should be recommending that appropriate service. And again, using that term appropriate instead of best, not because we don't think your child should have the best, but the way to make the argument for it is really to talk about the legal requirement and what's appropriate for your child. And I just wanted to flag for you, because it did come up on the chat. When we talk about evaluations and those progress reports, your child's preschool should be completing all of those progress reports and submitting them to the DOE by early February. So they're really already in the process of gathering all that data, and we'll be submitting it most likely in January, so that the DOE has it ready to go in February, and then the DOE will schedule and start holding IEP meetings shortly after that. All right, so moving on. All right, so on this slide, we're talking about specialized programs. These are programs that are available in some, but not all, non-specialized District 1 through 32 schools, right? So these are programs that are available in some neighborhood schools, but not all of them. And for some of these programs, you are required to submit an application in order to have your child be considered for a seat. So the first ones that we want to talk about are bilingual ICT or special class. The ICT and special class component of this are just like the ICT and special class programs that I just mentioned. ICT being for children with and without IEPs, and a special class being for all children with IEPs. It's a smaller class, for example, 12 to 1-to-1, with a special education teacher. What's unique about these programs is, as it says, it's bilingual. So it's for students who are speaking a language other than English in the home and need that additional language support. If your child's IEP recommends a bilingual ICT or bilingual special class, then the DOE is responsible for identifying a school that has that program. You do not, as I said, you do not apply for a bilingual ICT or special class. It will be dependent on your child's IEP program recommendation. Then we have two very popular programs, the ASD Nest and ASD Horizon programs. These are programs that are specifically designed for children who have autism, and for the most part are pretty competitive to get into. The ASD Nest program is a special type of ICT class. It's an ICT class that's smaller than usual, not the 25 students. I believe it's more like 18, where there is one special education teacher, one general education teacher, and it's a special type of ICT also, in that all the children in that class who have an IEP are classified as children with autism. The program, for the most part, serves children who are considered higher functioning, so they're at or above grade level, have very limited or no behavioral challenges, and there is a screening process to seek admissions. Okay, so after you apply, the DOE will review evaluations, will conduct their own evaluations in order to determine if your child is a good fit for the program. The ASD Horizon program, you can apply through the same application. It is a special type of special class. So all the children in the program are children with IEPs, children with a classification of autism, and they're in a small class with a special education teacher. The children who attend the Horizon program compared to the children who attend ASD Nest may need some additional academic or behavioral support. The program does use principles of applied behavioral therapy, or ABA therapy, in order to support those students. ACEs is for students with intellectual disability. It's a small special class where all the children are classified as students with an intellectual disability. There are very few ACEs programs for children in kindergarten. There is, and it's a separate application process, so you do have to apply to have your child be considered. One of the newest specialized programs is the iRead program. This is a program that specializes in early literacy. So it is for children whose disability affects their ability to read. It's a special type of ICT class. So again, a general education teacher and a special education teacher. What is unique about iRead is that there's also a part-time teacher who has expertise in early literacy, and that part-time teacher supports the full-time teachers and the students in engaging them and teaching them how to read. For children who apply to these programs, who apply to the ASD Nest, Horizon, ACEs, or iRead program, if your child is accepted, you will receive an additional acceptance letter in June notifying you that your child will be offered a seat to attend one of these programs. All right, so some additional specialized programs. One, also fairly new, is the AIMS program. This is a program that's available in some, but not all, District 75 schools. So again, District 75 being the DOE special education schools. The AIMS program is also for children with autism, but as opposed to NEST and Horizon, it's children who have very significant needs. It is for children who, well, first as background, it is generally a class of 6 students, 1 special education teacher, 1 full-time speech therapy teacher, and a paraprofessional. So there is that additional support as opposed to the 6 to 1-to-1, where all the children will receive speech therapy every day. The program also uses principles of ABA and verbal behavioral therapy. Just like the other specialized programs on the previous page, you do have to apply to be considered for this program. And again, it is for children who have pretty significant needs, both academic delays, behavioral needs, but also with verbal and communication needs. We've seen that it has become pretty popular. So if you are interested in the program, you should apply. You can submit, by the way, the application to any of these programs. You can submit them now. You don't have to have any evaluations done beforehand. Then we have barrier-free and accessible schools. These aren't a specific type of program. We really include this here to say, or to highlight for you, that not every school can accommodate children with physical disabilities or disabilities that affect their vision, hearing, and their ability to navigate a building or a classroom. When you're applying to schools or thinking about applying to schools, you can find information about which schools are accessible. There's something considered fully and partially accessible, and you may choose to apply to those schools specifically. If your child needs an accessible school, it is something that you should also raise during your child's IEP meeting to make sure that the DOE recommends or includes that in the IEP and is looking for a placement that can meet your child's needs. So that could be, there are different types of accommodations. If your child needs an elevator, if all the classes need to be on the same floor, those are different things that can be taken into account. Okay, and so we will give a moment now to Q&A.
Yes. So there's a lot of questions about school choice and picking the school that you prefer for your child. We're going to talk a bit later about the kindergarten application process and how schools are assigned.
Yep, and I also see in the chat there's a question about links to the applications for NEST and Horizon programs at the end of the webinar. We do have a link to the specialized programs website on the DOE's website, and the applications can be found on that site. We'll also be sending, along with copies of these slides, other materials, including what we call our Turning 5 guide, that has even more information about all of these programs, the specialized programs and the continuum of services, including links to the applications and where you can get more information.
Someone asked, oh, sorry, I just lost it. Will the CSE team visit the preschool or the home to observe the student?
There is commonly a classroom observation as part of the child's Turning 5 process or as part of their evaluations. Just a couple of things to keep in mind. Your child's IEP or the IEP team may be a school-based team, right? So the person assigned to lead your child through the IEP process may be someone from a local elementary school, sometimes even possibly from the middle school. So it could be that it's someone from your child's school, typically the zone school, will be leading the process and also leading any evaluations and conducting observations. For the most part, the classroom observations used to be that someone from the DOE would physically go to your child's classroom if your child was enrolled in a program and observe your child there. If your child was receiving services in the home, then they could go to your home. Because of COVID, do not anticipate that there will be home visits. That said, we have heard that the DOE is going to be conducting classroom observations either in schools, in preschools. The preschools object because of social distancing requirements or other, limitations. Then the DOE will also be exploring virtual observations. So if your child's participating in a Google Classroom, the DOE may log on to that Google Classroom and observe how your child engages in that activity. Again, if you feel that the observations or evaluations, progress reports, if any of those documents are not accurate, and you should be reviewing them before the IEP meeting, you can ask the DOE to conduct new evaluations or observations, and you would definitely want to raise at the IEP meeting why you think the document that they're relying on is not accurate as a parent concern.
All right. Another question is, will my child's pre-K set up the meeting, or do I have to initiate it? No, you will not initiate the IEP meeting. You should get notification in the mail prior to the IEP meeting. A lot of the other questions that I'm reading are about picking the school of your choice, and I think that a lot of these questions are going to be answered in a bit. So we're going to wait, and if we don't answer them, please feel free to ask them again. But before we move on, unless you see anything else, Betty, is the kindergarten school psychologist doing the evaluation, classifying the disability?
So your child will receive a classification at the IEP meeting. That means that it's not just the decision of the school psychologist. If evaluations have been done, that school psychologist should be relying on those evaluations, but that can include any evaluations that you submit to the psychologist. Right, so any recommendation or determination should be made based on your child's needs, what evaluations reflect, what progress reports reflect, what you are saying at the IEP meeting, what your child's special education teacher is saying at the IEP meeting. It's a combination of multiple factors. And I do see in the chat, there's also a question of, can you apply to AIMS program if your child has not yet been recommended for a District 75 school? Yes, you can apply to any and all specialized programs. The DOE is accepting applications now. You can apply to them before your child's IEP meeting. And in many instances, it's best to apply before your child's IEP meeting. As I said, many of these programs are becoming competitive. And so it is best to get your application in on the earlier end, even if you don't have all the evaluations required. The application does ask for specific testing scores. The DOE should be conducting any evaluations that they need in order to complete that, help you complete that application.
And then there's some questions about the getting further assistance of, like, the school helping to choose the best school for your child, or helping to fill out specific paperwork. Again, remember that your DOE representative is always someone that you can rely on, but so is your child's preschool. So feel free to rely on them as resources. When you participate in the kindergarten IEP meeting, feel free to raise your concerns and also ask questions. So if you're not knowledgeable about the recommendations that they're making, ask them, ask questions about what it means. Okay. And then I'm seeing a repeat question about the IK program. That I don't. If they want to give more clarification on that. All right, we'll move on. All right, so I know we've gone through a lot. So your child will be entering a brand new school when they go to kindergarten, and we want to make sure that the IEP includes everything that's needed so that your child's new teacher, new school, has all of the necessary resources to support them, okay? So you will talk about different supports and services at the IEP meeting, and these should be included in your child's IEP. And we will discuss a bit in length what some of them are. This is not an extensive list of supports and services, but these are some of a lot of the common ones that we see. Okay, so the first is assistive technology. Technology is going to be any device or like a piece of equipment that's used to improve the functional capabilities of your child, of a child with a disability. Okay, so this device could be an iPad, it could be a computer or a communication device. Okay. Another support that you may see or discuss at the IEP meeting or on your, or maybe included on your child's IEP is a paraprofessional. A paraprofessional is going to be a professional that's assigned to address your child's individual needs and allow them to benefit from instruction in school. These paras can address behavioral issues, health issues, or even special transportation. However, it's important to note that a paraprofessional will not be your child's teacher. Okay. Another support that we see sometimes is counseling. Earlier, Betty mentioned parent counseling, for example, if your child has a classification of autism, and your child may also receive counseling. Nursing will be on your child's IEP if there are specific medical needs, if there are feeding concerns raised in the IEP, you'll see nursing on your child's IEP. Okay. The next three services that are listed, we like to talk about together. We call them related services: occupational therapy, physical therapy, and speech therapy. These are only some related services, but these are some of the most popular ones. Related services can be pull in or push out, which means that if it's pull in, then the therapist will go into the classroom. If it's push out, then the child will be taken from the classroom to receive their therapies. Okay, and the IEP team will decide how many times per week, what the length of the session is, and whether it's pull in or push out, and whether the therapies will be individualized or in a group setting. Okay, so you'll see something if your child has an IEP now, you may see something to the effect that says OT 2 times 30 times 1. So twice a week for 30 minutes individual. Okay. All right, next is special education teacher support services. This is also known as SETS, or used to be referred to or known as resource room. And this is a specially designed instruction from a special education teacher. And it can be direct or indirect, pull out or push in, individual or in a group. It's important to note that if it's in a group, it can be no more than 8 students in that group. Okay. And it may be between 3 hours a week and half of the day. For parents with students with IEPs now in preschool, you may be familiar with the term SEIT, Special Education Itinerant Teacher, and a lot of times they're often compared. The next is a behavioral intervention plan. If a behavioral intervention plan is recommended on your child's IEP or at the IEP meeting, it will also be accompanied by what's called a functional behavioral assessment. So an evaluation will be conducted, and then a plan will be put in place to address any behavioral concerns that may come up. And then another common support or service, better yet, that we may see on an IEP is specialized transportation. And this is going to be based on the student's need. In preschool, children who attend a special class or a SKIS class are automatically getting this door-to-door transportation, but this is not the case for kindergarten. You're going to have a discussion at the IEP meeting about whether your child needs door-to-door transportation to get to and from school safely. However, this doesn't mean that if specialized transportation is not on your child's IEP, that you won't be entitled to busing or some other form of transportation that we'll talk about a bit about later when we talk about kindergarten admissions. Okay. And note that these, again, this is not a comprehensive list of supports and services, but these are some of them, and you can get these services in any school setting. Okay. So we're wrapping up talking about the IEP meeting. So what happens next? So after the IEP meeting, in addition to you getting the IEP, the DOE is going to mail you what's called a prior written notice. That's this, the white form right here, stating the type of class that your child will be, that was recommended for your student and the services on the IEP. This letter is not going to have any school information, but it'll just describe the program that your child will receive. Additionally, you will get in the mail. It's typically mailed on green paper, what's called a school location letter. Okay. Your school location letter should have the same recommendation on the IEP and prior written notice. I always encourage parents to compare all of the forms to make sure that the recommendations are the recommendation that was made in the IEP meeting and that they all match. Okay. So the school location letter is going to state the school that the DOE is offering for your child. You'll receive this sometime in late spring or early summer, but by June 15th, you'll get this in the mail. If your child is recommended for a District 75 school, so that's one of the specialized schools that Betty was talking about, the school location letter will state the school where your child will get the District 75 class. That'll be included, excuse me, on the child's IEP. If your child is recommended for a bilingual ICT or special class or a barrier-free school, the location on the school location letter would also should also be able to implement the program, because they should know that the school is bilingual or barrier-free, etc. If your child is recommended for either general education, ICT, or a special class in districts 1 through 32, one of the non-specialized schools that we were talking about earlier, the school location letter is simply going to state the school that you were offered through the kindergarten admissions process. So we're going to talk about that a bit later, but that was the second process that we mentioned at the beginning of this presentation. So the placement will not be given based on what's the placement is not going to be given based on what's recommended on the IEP, and the letter is going to copy and paste from your offer through the kindergarten admissions process. Okay, so these two, you should get these two letters in the mail. So it's really important that you monitor your mail. Typically, the DOE would send all of these via mail, and they would be color coordinated. So we talked about at the beginning of the this presentation, the welcome packet that you would get in the mail detailing the kindergarten orientation meetings. Next in December or sometime later in January, you'll get that notice of referral. Again, the notice of referral is really important because you will be assigned your district representative in that notice of referral. Okay. Next, you may get what's called a notice of case reassignment. You'll only get this letter if your case is reassigned, if your DOE representative is assigned to a different district or you get a new one. Okay. And then you'll have the IEP meeting. After the IEP meeting, you will get a prior written notice in IEP, which is typically on white paper. And then your school location letter will come postmarked by June 15th, which would typically be on green paper. And then if you get accepted to one of those specialized schools that Betty was talking about, the Horizon, Nest, etc., you will get that separately in the mail. So it's really important to monitor your mail. As we were talking about earlier, if you're not getting, if you don't get the yellow packet, if you don't get the welcome packet, if you're not getting the notice of referral, you want to make sure that you're communicating with the CPSC or with your child's preschool to make sure that the DOE has your correct information on file. Okay. And also this is new, especially in light of COVID. It's important that the DOE knows the best way that they could reach you. Okay, so again, contact your DOE representative or the CPSC administrator. You can also tell your community coordinator, so that your information is updated. After schools closed last year, unfortunately, we heard from a lot of parents who didn't get these documents in the mail, and they were concerned that they didn't have a copy of their child's IEP, or they didn't know what school their child would be attending, because they weren't getting documents in the mail. So the DOE will be calling, should be calling your family soon to make sure that they have updated information and to make sure that they have the best way to reach you. So again, if you're not getting some of the documents that we've been talking about, you can also make sure that they have your updated information. And when your case is assigned, the DOE rep will also contact you. So let them know if you haven't gotten anything in the mail again. And especially if you haven't gotten anything by January, we're going to share an email. It's turning 5 at schools.nyc.gov. We're going to share this at the end, but you want to send an email to this email account so that you make sure that they have your correct information. This year, you can also choose to get your information via email. If this is a method that you prefer, you want to make sure that you're sharing your email address and giving consent to receive documents via email. Okay, so again, tell your CPSE administrator or your district representative that you would like to receive documents and notifications via email, and then you can create an account on NYC Schools, and the DOE will mail you a code so that you can receive those documents. Okay. And when you get these notifications and these documents, your IEP, you want to know that you have language access rights. Okay, so any documents should be sent in the parent's preferred language, and the DOE is required to provide the translation if you have a specific language. The DOE is also required to provide interpretation. So if you require an interpreter, you want to inform the DOE prior to the IEP meeting so that an interpreter is present at the meeting, and they can inform you and you understand the meeting. Okay. All mailings should be sent in your home language. This includes the welcome packet, all the documents that we were talking about, your child's IEP, your notice of referral, etc. If you're not receiving your documents in your preferred language, you should also contact your CPSE administrator or contact your DOE representative. And just remember that you have rights to translation and interpretation regardless of the language that you speak. These are the 9 common languages, these are the 9 languages that are presently covered. However, you can be sure to request further services, and if you require another language, you can contact the DOE and they can provide an interpreter based on that availability. Okay. All right, so questions. Let's see.
Just to follow up, we do have questions about the intensive kindergarten program for children who are interested in the ASD NEST program. There is part of ASD NEST is a separate program calling, I believe, Intensive K, where a child will spend 2 years in kindergarten. And it's for children who the DOE believes is a good fit for the ASD NEST program, but needs additional support or time in order to be ready. There's not a separate application process to be considered for Intensive K. If you apply to the ASD NEST program, based on the evaluations that the DOE will conduct, that the specialized program team will conduct, and what they learn from your child's preschool, they will discuss with you whether that is a recommendation that they are making.
Okay. I see a question about supports and services for children with feeding issues. If your child requires like a feeding tube, for example, you may see nursing on the IEP, or a specific recommendation, nursing for feeding or feeding therapy. etc. I see another question. Do I have the last say as to where my child attends? Again, you should know that you have rights, so participate in the IEP meeting and know your rights and participate as you will. If you don't agree with a recommendation, that recommendation, that disagreement should be noted in the parent concern section. So it can be noted there. And then towards the end of the presentation, we'll talk about different options that you have if there's a dispute or if you're in disagreement, okay? All right. I think that's it. Let's move on. All right, so we just got finished talking about the kindergarten IEP process, also known as the Turning 5 process. So now we'll talk about the kindergarten admissions process, and I'll give you a bit of an overview now. You will research some schools, apply this winter. You will receive an offer sometime in the spring. You have to accept that offer, or we'll talk about what happens if you don't. And then you'll hear from schools that you may be waitlisted to. Okay, but let's shoot a poll before we go on. Okay, so children are most likely to attend kindergarten at where? All right, so 72% say their zone school. Yes. So in a bit, we'll talk about school priorities and how that's factored in and assigned out. But yes, it's likely children are most likely to attend kindergarten at their zone school. But before we talk about priorities, let's talk a bit about researching kindergarten schools. So again, you can find your zone school by calling 311 or going online at My Schools and looking up some options. You can do virtual or attend open houses this year. Especially, it's likely that you will be participating in virtual tours and open houses of schools. If you go on the DOE's website, there will be a list. There should be a list of dates and times for virtual tours and open houses. And then to better understand the admissions priorities, you can also go on the DOE's website. And look at the emissions guide. And then we have some resources that should also help you that we'll talk about now. So typically the DOE would send what's called a kindergarten admissions guide. There's not a new guide this year, but the 2020 guide is still available. And much of the information is still accurate, but just note that it hasn't been updated. Please don't use this guide for deadlines. Remember, any of the deadlines that you would see in the kindergarten admissions guide would have applied for the 2020 school year. This guide is available in 10 languages on the DOE website. And typically there will be a drop down icon that you could scroll and find your preferred language. You could see a list of elementary schools in your district, and next to the school, there should be a symbol that indicates whether the school is accessible or not, right here. You see that, and then you'll see the grades that the school observes, and you can see the likelihood of success of getting into a school that you're non-zoned, meaning that you don't live in the zoned area. This admissions guide also indicates whether the school has gifted and talented programs, again, what grades are taught, um, and how many students received an offer. Okay, and while it includes phone numbers, we encourage you guys to make calls, but also do research and see if there's any virtual or opportunities to maybe email a parent coordinator or someone from the school to get more information if schools are closed and you can't communicate via phone. Okay.
Okay, so we're going to go over admissions priorities for zone schools. I'm glad that a lot of you got that last poll question correct, because it indicates you have a good sense of how the DOE schools make admissions offers. And just as a reminder, during the DOE kindergarten application process, you can apply to up to 12 of these non-specialized District 1 through 32 schools. You do not have to apply to 12. You can apply to as many schools as you like. We do encourage you to apply, even if you're not excited about a school, or even if you think, oh, my child's only chances are to get into their zone school. It is just a good opportunity, and sometimes your only opportunity, to really express your preference for where you would like your child to attend. And when you're thinking about applying, definitely apply to the schools you're most interested in, but also try to consider applying to some of these schools, or schools where you have a good chance of getting in. And so this is to let you know kind of the chances your child has. We're going to go over how schools make admissions offers. And so most schools are zone schools, meaning that they make first offers to children who live physically in the zone that's around the school. So children who live in that school zone have top priority. The very first priority are children who live in the school zone and have a sibling who will be attending that school next year as well. So if your child is, you currently have a third grader at that school, and that third grader is staying at that school for fourth grade, then your incoming kindergarten student has top priority if that's your zone school. If your child's in fifth grade and going to a middle school next year, you don't have that sibling priority. Your older child, the older sibling, needs to be attending the school next year. Next, after the children who live in the zone, schools will make offers to students in the district who have a sibling who will also be attending the school, and then children who live outside of the district but have a sibling who will also be attending the school. And by the way, sibling includes, I should say, brothers, sisters, stepbrothers, stepsister, foster care siblings as well. After the sibling priority, priorities 5 and 6 are children who currently attend the child's pre-K program. 5 is for children who live in the district and currently attend the pre-K program. 6 is for children who live outside of the district and currently attend the school's pre-K program. I think that this one comes as a surprise to many families that believe that because their child attended a pre-K at that building, that they don't even need to apply to kindergarten, and that their child's guaranteed a seat there. That's not the case, especially if you do not live in the school zone, and if your child does not have a sibling who will be in that school, you are pretty far down in the list of priorities. The next group of students who will receive an offer are other students who live in the district. And finally, the DOE or the school will make offers to students who live outside of the district. And what this really shows too, students outside of the district, that's why it's so unlikely or so hard for many children to get offers to schools outside of their borough, let alone just in a neighboring district. So again, these are things that you should keep in mind as you're applying to schools, so that you have a better sense of where your child is likely to receive an offer. And we're going to review this all again in the next slide. Oh, actually, before we do, yes, the prompt. Just to note that students who need an accessible school will receive an offer before other students in their priority group. Okay, So if a school only has enough seats to make offers to some children who attend, who live in the district and attend the pre-K program, but not all of them, first, it will make offers to children who live in the district and attend a pre-K program and need an accessible school. And we'll see that in play in a minute. Okay, so we'll do a little poll here to kind of see if everything has sunk in. But basically, as an example, we have, PS 123, they have 20 kindergarten seats available. The following students applied: 5 of the zone students, 10 students who live in the district and will have a sibling at the school next year, 9 students who live in the district, do not have a sibling who will be attending the school, and 1 child who lives outside of the district but attends the school's pre-K program. So of these students, who will get an offer first? Okay, so because PS 123 only has 20 seats, they cannot offer a seat to all the students who applied. So they're going to make offers based on the list of priorities. 76% of you said that zone students will be the first students to get an offer. That is right. Zone students with a sibling or without a sibling at the school will be the first set of children to receive an offer. After that, we have the 10 children who live in the district and have a sibling who will also be attending the school. Again, this is just based on the list of priorities. The school has enough seats to make all of them offers. That's great. But now they only have 5 seats left, and there are still 10 other children who've applied. So what happens next? Of those 9 other in-district students, there will be basically a random lottery to see which one of those students will be able to receive an offer. And if we hit next, you'll see that some, but not all of those students will receive an offer, and that the child who lives outside of the district did not receive an offer. They are all on the school's wait list and can continue to hear from the school even throughout the summer and potentially even through September. Okay, we'll take a moment for Okay, so we have a couple of questions about the application process already. We said apply this winter, and we don't have the exact dates because the DOE has not announced the exact dates for the kindergarten application. You do not apply directly to the schools. You apply through a central application. I believe Alana covered these slides either at myschools.nyc. You can apply also by telephone. You apply to up to 12 schools through the central process, not to the individual schools. The DOE will be posting on their website the dates that the application opens and the date it will close. It is typically in December and January. They have said that they anticipate having the application around the same time this year, but have not announced specific dates. So keep you posted. You can also sign up for email updates to make sure you're notified by going to the DOE website. And then what happens if you move to another county in New York during this process? If these admissions priorities, in order to get an offer, are based on your child's current standing. If you move and your child falls outside of one of these priorities, then that does affect your admissions offer. Your child needs to remain eligible for these seats. So if you move, you may lose your spot at the school. There are certain protections if you're moving because you are a family that's in temporary housing or moving into a shelter. But please keep in mind that the admissions priorities are dependent on kind of remaining in those priority groups. So we've kind of gone over admissions priorities for zone schools, District 1 through 32 zone schools. There are some schools that are not zoned. And in fact, there are some districts that have all non-zoned schools. These districts are District 1 in the Lower East Side of Manhattan, District 7 in the South Bronx, and District 23 in Brownsville, Brooklyn. What that means is, although there are not any zoned schools and you don't apply to a specific school, you do have similar priority to any school in your district. For District 7, it is divided into like a northern and southern district or area. And you will, depending on where you live, will have more priority to those areas. But apart from that, it really follows other categories, including having a sibling who will also be at the school, attending pre-K at that school, but mostly that you live in the district. For specific admissions priorities for any given school, you can find that in the DOE's Kindergarten Admissions Guide that Alana went over. You can also find that on myschools.nyc. That is a website that includes an online directory. It's also the website where you can go to apply to schools once the application opens. I'll also just make a note about District 1. They do have what's called a diversity in admissions program, where they are prioritizing students who, for example, are low income, students in temporary housing, students who are learning English or ELS, and other factors in order to increase the diversity in their schools. So that is something that affects the priority groups. You can find more information about District 1 specifically on the District 1 website, and we have those guides and resources later on in the presentation. Okay. Oh, okay. So now we will cover more actually how to apply. Sorry, that hadn't been done before. Again, the application dates are unknown, but we will leave December and January. You can apply online at myschools.nyc. You can apply by phone by calling the DOE enrollment office. That's the 718-935-2009 number. They should be open Monday through Friday, 8 to 6 p.m. Usually families can also go in person and apply by paper at a family welcome center. Unfortunately, family welcome centers are still closed because of the pandemic. So that is not an option this year to apply by paper in person at a family welcome center. But you can still request help by emailing a family welcome center if you have questions about the application, if you have questions about finding your zone school or different things like that. You can email them to request assistance. The application, you can apply in your preferred language. The application itself at My Schools is available in 10 languages. You can also, the DOE also has interpreters available, especially if you call by phone for up to more than 200 languages. So they should really be able to meet your needs. So even if you don't see it on the website, give them a call or let them know that you need the application in another language. The application dates will be posted on My Schools once we know them, and also on the DOE website, which is schools.nyc.gov/kindergarten. And again, at that schools.nyc.gov kindergarten address, you can also sign up for email updates so that you get notified once the application is available. There's no benefit to applying early. Any application received by the application deadline will be treated the same way. And again, the admissions priorities are really what is used to determine which schools can make which students offers, or how schools make students offers. So as you're applying, and again, you can apply to up to 12 schools, but you do not have to apply to that many. Some things that you should take into account is that you should rank the schools in order of your preference. Rank schools number 1, 2, 3 that you want your child to attend, that you're most excited about and that you think would be best for your child. That said, even if they're not your zone school, right? But within those 12, do think about your admissions priorities, right? So think about, don't apply to only schools that are outside of your borough because your chances of getting into any of those schools are low. So do consider applying to some schools where your child has a better chance of receiving an offer. So apply to your zone school or other schools that are likely to admit your child. Another thing to think about is transportation. Particularly, and this is why we did that poll, we have a lot of families here who said their child attends a preschool special class and or an integrated class. For preschool, the DOE will automatically provide door-to-door transportation to those students. That is not the case for kindergarten. In order to receive door-to-door transportation, that is something that needs to be recommended on your child's IEP, and it is not automatic. It is dependent on your child's individual needs. If your child's IEP does not recommend door-to-door transportation, then whether your child will receive busing depends on a few factors that we'll talk about next. So again, kind of just went over this, but your child will receive transportation if it's on the IEP, and that would be door-to-door. Usually it's a smaller bus where there's a driver and a matron, and your child's picked up, the safest curb closest to your home. Otherwise, students will receive transportation, but not busing necessarily, if their school is more than half a mile from home and in their school district. And I say it's not necessarily a bus because not all schools have applied for a yellow bus route, or there may not be a way to reroute the bus to pick up your child to add an additional stop. So if that's the case, then your child would receive, or you would receive, a Metro card in order to take your child to and from the school. Students in temporary housing and students in foster care have some additional rights and eligibility for transportation. So they may receive transportation even if the school is, for example, outside of their school district, but that also does not guarantee that it would be a bus. It could also be a Metro card. And that yellow bus service is usually called school to bus stop, right? So it's not from, as close to your home, but it could be, within even a few blocks as a designated site where other students are also getting picked up and dropped off by the school bus. If you have questions about transportation or concerns, you can email the DOE at earlychildhoodbusing@schools.nyc.gov. You can call 718-392-8855. That's also the number you call to make a complaint against, or your child's bus is regularly arriving late. And you can find more information at schools.nyc.gov/transportation. These will all be kind of active links when you get the PowerPoint presentation after the webinar. So throughout this process, Alana gave the very general overview. The DOE, you apply by the end of January, most likely. The DOE will start making offers probably in April. You should receive notification letting you know which school that you applied to made your child a kindergarten offer. When you receive that offer, you should accept the offer. If you applied by My Schools, online on My Schools, you should be able to accept the offer on My Schools. If you applied over the phone, you should receive instructions also on how to accept that offer. You will then also receive information about how to register. We don't quite know what this will look like this year. Pre-registration, usually you go in person. You don't necessarily have to bring your child, but you go in person and submit some documents. And we have a list of those documents in our materials. with schools potentially being closed or really practicing social distancing, it may not be possible for you to go and register in person. The DOE should be giving you more information about how to do that. Last year it was school specific, and you should be receiving some of that information in the spring as well. You should accept the offer, because even if you are not satisfied with the school that made your child an offer, accepting it reserves that seat and doesn't affect your chances of getting into any school that you ranked higher than the school that made you an offer. You will automatically be on the wait list for any school that you ranked higher than the one that made you an offer. So for example, if you applied to 6 schools and the school that you ranked 5th made you an offer, you can accept that offer. You can pre-register your child to attend there. You are automatically on the wait list for schools you ranked 1, 2, 3, and 4, even if you accept that offer. And you can hear back from those schools even throughout the summer. Sometimes we hear that families are hearing from the schools in September, because a lot of things can change, right? A child that received an offer may be accepted to one of the specialized programs, and if that program is not at that school, that opens up a seat. A family may have moved out of the district or out of New York City. That'll also open up a seat. So there is still, we do see children receive offers from waitlists. It's not unheard of. But ultimately, if the school that made your child an offer and you've accepted the offer, would create a hardship for you and your family, if it would be really difficult for your child to attend that school, potentially because of where their siblings attend schools, right? So there would be transportation difficulties or challenges. If there are medical reads that impede your child from going to that school, you can request what used to be called a hardship transfer, requesting that the DOE identify a different school for your child. This is not a way of guaranteeing that your child will receive an offer to any particular school. It is really a way, it's meant to be a way for the DOE to ease that hardship, right? So if the problem is you have 2 children going to schools that are very far away from each other, the hardship transfer doesn't mean that necessarily your younger child will be able to transfer into the school where your older child attends. But it could mean that your child, they can offer you a seat to your child at a closer school than the one the sibling attends. Okay. And again, we've mentioned this when we talked about the school location letter. The kindergarten admissions process, the kindergarten IEP process really comes together in that green school location letter. If your child is recommended for a non-specialized school in particular, that green school location letter, the school listed, should be the school that made your child an offer through the kindergarten admissions process or through their wait list, right? That should match up. You should contact the school and make sure that they can give your child the services recommended on your child's IEP. We see this be particularly important if your child's IEP recommends a 12 to 1-to-1 special class in a non-specialized school. Although all those schools should have that program, in practice, they don't. And so you really want to know sooner rather than later. If they do not offer that program or don't intend to next year, then there are a few options, right? You could ask the DOE for another public school placement that does have that class. You can see if that school will open a 12 to 1-to-1. Maybe there are other kindergarten students who will be enrolling who also need that type of classroom. Or you can think through different accommodations that the DOE could provide in order for that placement to be appropriate for your child. Finally, you may also be entitled to what we call a Nickerson letter that'll allow your child to attend a non-public school for a year, because if the DOE didn't offer a placement that can serve your child based on their IEP recommendation. So if the school program doesn't match, if they say they can't implement the IEP, there are a few steps to take. One of them is to contact our helpline, and we'll give you more information about that in a moment. And before we wrap up the application process, I want to do a quick note on charter schools. Charter schools are not DOE schools, but they are public schools. So they are free public schools, and they are run by a board of trustees and not by the Department of Education. Some Key things: you cannot apply to these schools through the DOE kindergarten admissions process. You can apply as one of your 12. You cannot include a charter school. But you can learn more about charter schools at NewYorkCityCharterSchools.org. You can apply to the schools either directly or through a charter school centralized application process that's on the same website. For charter schools, most applications are due by April 1st. So it is a couple of months after you've already applied to the DOE schools. And we're just going to do a quick poll about charter schools before moving on. Okay, and so it's a true or false: families of children with disabilities cannot apply to charter schools. Okay, most of you got this right on. That is a false statement. Families of children with disabilities can in fact apply to charter schools. And not only can you apply to charter schools have to serve students with disabilities, right? They are required to accept students with IEPs and to implement their IEPs. That said, many charter schools, I mentioned that not every DOE non-specialized school has a 12 to 1-to-1 program, for example, that's special class. Many charter schools do not have special classes either. So you may want to consider whether to apply to charter schools based on your child's IEP program recommendation and needs. So it is something for you to keep in mind. That said, the charter school should work with you. They should let you know if they can't implement the IEP, but also work with you to accommodate your child's needs. So to see what services they can offer to meet your child's needs. Even if you apply to charter schools and you're sure you want your child to apply to attend a charter school, the DOE is still responsible for making you a kindergarten offer to a DOE school. So you will continue to receive notifications from the DOE. You should still receive a green school location letter. That letter will not recommend the charter school. It'll recommend a DOE school, but it doesn't mean that you have to accept it. It's just offered to you as an alternative if you do choose to enroll your child in a DOE program. And so I think this may be one of the last times for a Q&A before the end of the session. So we'll just give a moment to see.
The PowerPoint slides, yes, the PowerPoint slides will be shared after this webinar. So I saw a question, and I think a couple of people raised this about getting the resources from today. So at the end of the presentation, you will have a list of resources for today.
And we have a question about whether children must attend kindergarten. Children who were born in 2016 must attend kindergarten next year, or if they can request to stay in preschool for another year. That is a question that we get fairly commonly, and it is something that we do address in the guides that we will be sending to you. But the short answer is that, for preschool and for kindergarten, the grade your child attends really is dependent on the year they were born, right? So children who were born in 2016 are expected to start kindergarten in September of 2021. That does not mean that you're required to attend kindergarten, period. And it doesn't mean or that you need to attend kindergarten or attend any type of school. That said, your child will be expected to start first grade in September 2021, unless you get superintendent permission to have your child enrolled in kindergarten. The issue there, you won't know if that is granted until it's too late, right? Until a year from now. And so at that point, if you kept your child home, for example, now they've missed kindergarten, they're potentially expected to start in the first grade. So that is something you want to keep in mind. Another thing you should keep in mind, particularly if your child is a student with a disability, is that the kindergarten IEP process is all about making sure your child has the right services that your child needs in order to make progress in kindergarten. So that could mean that, with intensive supports or the right supports, the right program, your child is prepared and ready for kindergarten. You should not be judging it based on what uh, a typical, for example, kindergarten curriculum demands of your child, right? If your child's not ready to be in a classroom with, more than 25 students, then would your child be able to be in kindergarten if it is a small special class or an ICT class? So those are really things to consider.
Should we move on? All right, so there were a couple of questions earlier about what if I don't agree with the result of the IEP meeting, or what if the school recommends something that I don't want. So we'll talk a bit about the dispute resolution. If there's a dispute, if you're not getting responses, if your rights are violated, how you can go about trying to resolve the disputes. So we always recommend first that you go to your DOE representative. Remember, your DOE representative is that person that will be identified to you in your notice of referral form. That's going to be the blue letter. Typically, the blue letter that you will receive at some point in December or early January. And this is the person that's going to be assigned to lead the IEP team, and you should feel comfortable going to them if you have any problems. Um, Separately, next, you may want to contact the DOE Special Education Office, and this is that Turning 5 email address that we were mentioning if you weren't getting notifications in the mail. So here it is right here. If you're still not getting notifications and you've tried contacting the CPSC or the CSC or your preschool for help, you can also use this email address to get information, and you can feel free to email this website, this email address if you have any disputes. We always encourage families, if you're contacting the Turning 5 email, to copy Advocates for Children at kindergarten@afcnyc.org. If you do so, we monitor this email account, and we can, in some instances, monitor and make sure that if there's a dispute, that it's getting resolved, or follow up for more information from you to see if your issue has been addressed. Okay. Next, you may want to contact the DOE's Office of Student Enrollment if, say, for example, you haven't received proper notifications in the mail regarding school placement, etc. And then lastly, depending on the issue, you may want to request a mediation or impartial hearing, or file a formal complaint, depending on what that issue is. If you're going the route of requesting a mediation, an impartial hearing, or filing a complaint, we always recommend that you do so with the consultant and advice from an attorney. And again, we'll share our information at the end of this presentation, but Advocates for Children may be a resource for you. Okay. We're including links with this PowerPoint that we will share with you, links to our Turning 5 guide that has more information. Anything that we've discussed today, you can also read about in more detail in our Turning 5 guide. The DOE, we're also sharing the DOE's resources. They have a Turning 5 guide. You can find information about District 75 and also their specialized programs, and we've included all of the links for you here. Okay. All right. Some more special education resources are the DOE kindergarten orientation meetings. So when we first started, I told you guys about a welcome packet that you should have received in the mail. That yellow welcome packet would have also included another slip that says kindergarten orientation meetings, and this lists the dates, with the first date being November 5th, and we have a couple coming up in December and the last towards the end of January. Okay. These are going to be, you can either watch the sessions live, depending, or if they're pre-recorded, you can go back and watch them later. Okay. Myself or Betty may also be attending some of these. So we may be monitoring if there's questions. Normally we'll tell you to say hi. Registered for it. Okay. More resources, again, AFC's Kindergarten Admissions Guide. You can also go on our website and find a comprehensive list of a lot of guides, including rights, the DOE's resources. We're including the links to all of those, their online application, the kindergarten website that includes links if you're interested in those virtual tours and the open houses that should include dates, and then family welcome centers. All right, so we want to thank you all for attending. Before you go, please complete our evaluation. We know that this is a complicated process. We've shared a lot of information with you. Sorry if we weren't able to answer all of the questions. You should feel free though to look at our guide, attend more workshops. We will be providing more workshops throughout December and January. You may also want to, again, participate in DOE's workshop, and then we'll also be having live, live Q&A sessions throughout December and January, where we can answer more questions if you have them and they weren't answered today, okay? You can always contact our helpline if you have any other specific issues. Our helpline is open from Monday to Thursday from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. and we've included our email address and phone number so that you can reach someone with your specific concerns. Okay.
I'll just repeat what Alana said by thanking you all for attending. We will be posting this recorded session online. So if there's just one part you want to go back to, you can do that after. But if you want to, the upcoming sessions will be broken up into smaller segments where we'll cover the IEP process and separately the kindergarten admissions process. You can feel free to attend those. And a lot of sessions will be having at least once a week a kind of live chat Q&A where, unlike this webinar, you will be, you'll have audio. You can just ask us questions directly and we'll be answering those questions for the group. So not a structured presentation. It's really an opportunity, kind of like office hours or just like a meeting with us. So we look forward to seeing you there or answering your questions through the helpline. Thank you again so much for participating. We wish you the best of luck. And just know that a lot of you were worried or anxious about this process. You now have a lot of information under your belt. So you are already well underway of getting prepared. And I'm sure you'll be great advocates for your children and for your students. And I guess while some of you are still here, just looking through the Q&A, there's a question of if children are currently receiving preschool special education services, will you still get a welcome packet? Yes, the welcome packet is specifically for children who are currently receiving preschool special education services. You should have received that packet this fall, most of it printed on yellow paper. If you have not, you should contact your CPSC office, be that your child's CPSC administrator or the community coordinator that works at your CPSC office. Their emails are posted on the DOE website, and we linked to them during this presentation to let them know that you didn't get that packet, just to make sure that they have the right contact information for you. Again, the DOE is also reaching out to families to make sure they're going to be calling you to make sure they have your right contact information. That's another chance for you to let them know you haven't been receiving materials yet. And hopefully, definitely be on the lookout for that blue notice of referral. And if you don't get anything from the DOE by January, you should consider emailing them at that Turning 5 inbox that we shared. We will be conducting this presentation in Spanish. The schedule for those sessions, or this similar to everything we covered today, we will be doing this Thursday from 4 to 6 in Spanish. And then we also have different sessions and Q&As scheduled in December and January. Parents can also participate. We can provide interpretation services for any of these sessions that you can, so you can listen to live interpretation. We are considering, based on need, we'll consider doing a presentation in Chinese this January as well. You will get this PowerPoint slide and other materials in an email after the webinar. Okay, that looks like those are most of the Q&A questions, and thank you. It looks like everyone who's here has completed the poll.